Jesus is just sitting there waiting. If he wanted to run, now was his time. He's not missing it, right? 200 torches coming your way, you're going to see it. They come across the valley, up onto the hill, and they're standing outside the garden, which I assume means there's a gate. So Jesus walks out of that gate on his own and meets them and asks them the first question. Who are you looking for? And it's on them to deal with him as soldiers should, right? Like, arresting one guy shouldn't require much. Jesus might be surrounded by 12 others, but 12 to 200 is kind of not an even match, right? Particularly Roman soldiers, right? This would be the equivalent of us sending special forces after somebody. This is not a big deal for them. And they're the ones that are scared. They're the ones that are uncertain, don't know what to do about it, right? All these guys, and they step back when Jesus asks them directly what they want. Because they're kind of expecting to arrest, right? They're not expecting somebody to challenge them. Jesus is literally in glory as God saying, yeah, what are you here for? Why don't you make it plain? And it's at that point that Jesus is like, all right, take me, leave these guys alone. You don't need to take them with you. He willingly steps forward. It's at this point that we see Peter's character, right? Who here knows what happens when people are afraid? What are the two responses? Fight or flight. Gotta love Peter. He doesn't just pick one. In this particular moment, Peter sees 200 some odd men coming at him, and Peter's response with his sword, which never has been mentioned before, but for this particular night, he has one. He pulls it out, and he attempts to attack one of the leaders of the temple guards, right? Malchus. Cuts off his ear, and this particular account doesn't tell us that Jesus puts it back on. But we sort of have to assume he does, right? Because if you cut off somebody's ear in front of Roman soldiers, what's going to happen? You're going to get arrested at the very least, right? You're not going to cut off somebody's ear in front of the cops. Like, this is duh, right? So Jesus is like, what are you doing? Did I tell you to cut off his ear? Did I say, please cut off his ear, Peter? No. Jesus is like, all right, here's what we're going to do. You're not going to get arrested because I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to deal with this. This is my job to go. You just stay here with your sword in its sheath. And Jesus goes. Now, I would extrapolate a little bit from that, right? It doesn't say a lot of those things, but those are pretty easy leaps from where we are, right? Jesus is in charge. He's the one that decides who gets arrested when. There's no way they caught him off guard. A, he's God, and B, it's pretty obvious to see that many people coming at you. He knew. And he warned everybody. Even though he warned Peter, Peter still obviously didn't get the memo. And that's where we are. And so at this point, we move into the second piece. So right now, what we have is Jesus is betrayed by one of his closest followers. Right? One betrayal down. 18, 15 through 27. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that other disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing outside of the gate, so the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I'm not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples, about his teaching. And Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those that heard what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" And Jesus answered, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" when Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing around and warming himself. They asked him, "You're not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied and said, "I'm not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, the rooster crowed. So, Peter fights, and Peter flees. He does both almost simultaneously, right? Almost in the same few hours. Now, Peter's whole response of fighting 200 some odd men, a few more than he could probably take on his own, right, is idiotic. And now he's standing in the courtyard where Jesus is currently talking to the high priest's father-in-law, Annas. He's being questioned about who he is and what he's done. And this is before Jesus technically goes on trial, but it's in the high priest's house in the courtyard, right? Right there, waiting for things to happen. And we don't really know who this other disciple was. It doesn't tell us. But somebody who knew the high priest well enough to get in, which I think is interesting. Now, it doesn't really matter who it was, but however it happened, Jesus is literally feet away from Peter in another room being spoken to. And they're standing around this charcoal fire, which tells us what? It's cold. If any of you have ever been to Israel, it's not a particularly cold place. There's really only one time that I can think of where it would be cold, and that would be at nighttime, right? It's a little chilly then. That's about it. Most of the rest of the time, it's anywhere between 65 and 100, right? It's pretty comfortable there. At least for us, right? We would be wearing t-shirts. Probably even at night we'd be wearing t-shirts. And they're standing around this fire, and the fire itself is, in Greek, it's an anthracoi, right? It's a charcoal fire. It's not wood chips, it's not full logs. This is just charcoal, right? It's warm, but it's not putting off a lot of light, right? And Peter is standing around at this time of night. It's dark, right? Obviously it isn't dawn yet. The rooster hasn't crowed. And he's standing around this fire warming himself. And that's the moment where people are asking questions, right? I mean, I'm sure the courtyard is lit in some way. So they can kind of see who he is. And they keep asking the question, aren't you one of the disciples? Aren't you one of the disciples? So it gets down to the guy who was there when his relative's ear got cut off. At this point, it's clearly a lie, right? Let's just be honest. This guy is a relative of the guy whose ear got chopped off. He probably recognizes Peter pretty well. Because you can't go through the experience of having your relative's ear cut off and then put back on by somebody to be like, oh, do I know you? It seems a little far-fetched, yes? They know he's lying. And this is the guy who has the testimony, right? This is the witness to Jesus' life, his preaching, his travels, his signs. Of anybody in the entire area who could know who Jesus was and what he said, this is the guy. The reality is we can only be betrayed by our friends. You can't get betrayed by your enemies. People who don't know you can't betray you because you never let them close enough. It's only the people that live with us, talk with us, cry with us, hold our hands, eat our meals with us that can actually hurt us in this way. And Jesus told him it was coming. And Peter didn't believe him. And in this moment, Peter is very aware that he's lying. Everyone around him is very aware that he's lying. Jesus knows he's going to lie. It's at this moment that Peter has to know he's a liar. Right? No other time in life would he know this more clearly. I brought up the whole fire thing. He said a charcoal fire. It's very interesting because John is going to use that word here and later on. And And there's another place in the Bible where a charcoal fire is used, and I want to bring that up. I'm going to read that section. So there's Isaiah chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lofty, and the train of his robes filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And the one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. The pivots on the threshold shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Peter's a pretty simple guy, I would say. Fisherman. He does have a master's degree. But he's been hanging out with the King, with the Lord of hosts, for 3 years. He has seen miracle atop miracle atop miracle. He has heard amazing things. He has watched food multiply, watched people walk across water, heard and seen things that we will never see in this lifetime. And in this particular moment, before Isaiah is cleansed, you all remember how Isaiah gets cleansed of being unclean-lipped? A coal is pulled from a charcoal fire and placed upon his lips. But before that happens, he realizes something about himself. Isaiah says, I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. He lives in Israel, so does Peter. And the people of Israel continually lie and cheat and use their mouths for gain and profit. And Peter, even though he knows he's been walking around with the King, lies to get out of having the same fate. And he knows it. He is a man of unclean lips. He is guilty of that. Does he live among a people of unclean lips? Beginning of chapter 19, Pilate brings Jesus out after he's tried him, and he says, this is in 19:4, Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, Here is the man. When the chief priests and police saw him, they shouted, Crucify him! Crucify him! And he says, Take him out yourselves and crucify him. We are a people of unclean lips. We know the King, but we cannot possibly do right by him. It just can't be done. It couldn't be done then, and it can't be done now by any works or thoughts or feelings or hopes that you have. You cannot get there. You will not get there. It will not happen. Jesus knows that. God knows that. And this week is the week to remember you did not make it there yourselves. You are now and will forever be carried upon the back of the King, the Lord of hosts. That is how it works. You are cleaned by his actions and his actions alone. This is Holy Week. This is the time when we remember Christ's life, his death, most importantly. As you go out this week, I want you to remember that all the actions that Jesus does in his life lead up to this particular time. A time when he willingly stands in front of the Roman soldiers, the temple priests, the high priest, the Roman governor of the area. And he stands by himself, all of his friends having betrayed him and walked away. And he meets the fate we deserve all by himself. There is no help for him because we cannot help him. By no action we can we do so. And I don't really want to spoil the end, but I think you know it. And next week we will talk more about that. But I want you to be aware of what Jesus knew and what he did for you. There is at no time in John's attempt to relay his witnessing of it that Jesus isn't very sure of what he's going to do. I have no doubt that it was a struggle. He is human. But he's also very much the King of Kings. And he is stepping forward in our place. Don't take these men, take me. He is standing in your place. And this is the week to remember that. Will you pray with me? Lord God, we come before you as we remember the actions that you took for us. The life you led, the teachings you taught, and the place you stand in front of us, guarding us from judgment. Standing there and taking it for us. We would ask, Lord, that you would give us minds and hearts to be thoughtful of that, to remember where we are unclean. Our lips speak things untrue. Our bodies do things that betray you. Who we are cannot live up to you. We are not on our own righteous. We are not on our own sinless. We need you to stand between us and judgment. Lord God, be with us, guide us, help us be mindful of you, help us be mindful of our own state, to know that it's you that saves us. Bring us back, Lord, next week to celebrate with you as you win the victory for all of us. Guide us and be with us now and forever. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. By the power of the Holy Spirit, we say,